So can you understand this? मेरा oh man मेरा पसंद का रंग है सबज.
Hassan, help. No, I have no idea what you just said.
Okay. Well,
Hassan, help.
whoa, hold on. Take it easy. You just said green is his favorite color.
So today we're gonna get to know a little bit about Myra. She's our guest today, and she's also joining with Hassan from our previous episode. So Myra, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? How old are you?
Okay, hi guys. So I'm 21. I was born and raised in the States. I've been here my whole life. Fun fact, I've never actually been to Pakistan.
Oh.
Though my parents are Pakistani. And I'm currently in uni and I'm studying neuroscience.
Okay. Have you ever wanted to go to Pakistan?
I have, yeah, but because of school, the only time I would get is essentially from like May to August, and that never worked out. So I guess maybe after I'm done school, I would want. But yeah, for sure, I would want to go once.
Have you learned any Urdu from your parents, or do your parents talk in Urdu?
Oh, okay. So I can understand a bit. Someone is speaking to me in Urdu, but I can't speak it. At home, we mostly talk in English because my mom has spent most of her life abroad. So I just learned how to say, how are you?
How is that said? Can you say it?
Kaisi ho.
Okay, yeah.
But then I asked the person, and the person was a guy, and they're like, that's only for a girl.
Oh, yeah. Kaise ho would be for a guy.
Yeah. So then I was like, hey, kaisi ho. And he's like, that's only for a guy, not a girl. I mean, that's only for a girl, not a guy.
Yeah, English is a really lucky language, I think. It doesn't have that gender separation, I guess, for objects. Even French has it, Spanish has it.
Yep. And not only that, a lot of times you can use so many words, like so many different words for one thing. So like really confused when...
Yeah, it's a really tricky language, but it's fun. It's a good language.
Agreed.
Yeah, my wife doesn't speak Urdu either. She can understand it just like you. And she does have the accent just like you as well. She... whenever she tries to speak in Urdu or sing a song, she's embarrassed because she pronounces the words with an English accent.
Yeah, actually, I get called a coconut a lot. I don't think that's a compliment, but...
Hold on.
But it's like
what does it have to do with the language?
Because, like, I'm brown on the outside, white on the inside.
So, no. We have a different word for such people. You guys know I'm from
burger.
Dubai, so. No.
Oh my god,
burger is a different term. So, over the last, you could say, 8 to 9 years, so a lot of mixed up people ended up in Dubai. So I once met a guy. He's half Lebanese, half Russian, and half Nigerian. So stuff like that. And so we Pakis, we just have a one word for them. We call them gate, as in mix. So yeah.
Oh, never heard of that before.
Yeah, gate. I think it's a Punjabi word. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's what they used to refer. Oh, he Gatha. It's like, boy, this guy's half mix. So something. It's even used for half Pakis who don't speak, Yeah. Like, oh, my mom's Paki, but my dad is British or Moroccan, stuff like that. So.
Yeah. Another one is ABCD in the US. Have you ever been called that, Myra?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, Gatha I've never heard of. That's interesting.
Same.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, because you are in the West. And things are different.
Yeah,
right.
I've been called burger by Pakistani people. They know who they are.
Right.
But
that's interesting because burger isn't used much here in the States. I've never been called a burger.
Oh no, I've been called a burger on the server a lot, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. On the server it makes sense because it's
mixed. Everyone. What language do you think in? Is it in English?
Both. That's the hard part. People say that all the time.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, people are like, do you count in English or Urdu? And I'm like, both. It just depends on what, I guess, mindset I'm in. It's weird. But yeah, sometimes I'll be like working out or something and I'm counting the reps in my mind and I'm doing it in Urdu or Punjabi, right? Ik, do, tin. Other times I'm just counting in English, especially at work. So I guess it just has to do with the setting.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's strange.
Well, bilingual people are supposed to be extremely smart, so...
Bilingual? I speak 4 languages. Am I supposed to be smart?
Okay, well,
Yeah,
what's the word for
quadlingual.
after? Yeah. There you go.
Speak. Wait,
think-
let me count. How many languages I speak? I speak Arabic. Okay.
Mhm.
I speak Urdu. I speak Saraiki. I speak a bit of Sindhi. I speak English. How many languages are those? 5?
I guess you're a special case.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You're smart
Okay.
too.
Maybe.
Okay, so Myra, let me ask you a random question, just out of
Of
the blue.
course.
So if you could only play one game for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
Monopoly.
Monopoly? Huh.
Because I always win. For some reason, I always win. So are you talking about like a computer game?
I guess that's what I had in mind, but I didn't think
I don't play computer games at all. The only game I could think of was Tekken. Taken?
Tekken, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Because I used to play that with my uncle as a kid,
Mhm.
and it was fun.
Okay, so you're not
So
into
Tekken.
video gaming in general?
Maybe I'm not cool enough yet.
Oh man, Hassan's probably like,
Shaking right now, like what?
yeah.
I know. Well, I just discovered the internet this year, so
Mhm.
hopefully, as I
We're living under
dive, yeah,
You
okay,
live
I
in
was
America.
living under a rock, but I will
Mhm.
just, as I dive more into the internet, hopefully I'll learn how to game.
Huh. But how is that possible? You grew up in New York, right?
Yeah.
You just didn't get interested in the internet?
No, I really didn't.
Mhm.
I was never interested in social media or
Huh.
I didn't know you could like talk to people on the internet. Like I know it sounds like such
Wow.
an absurd idea to people
She's
that
21.
haven't lived that way, but I have. So for me, it's a totally new concept and a totally new world.
Wow.
So
How did
gaming.
you? Yeah, I'm curious now. How did you discover Discord?
So I had a friend who used to go on a website and they closed down, so they opened a server up, and that server was really trash. So I left it after a while, but that's when I found out what Discord was.
Mhm.
And after that, one of my friends who's a gamer, I was just talking to her about it, and she told me, you can search for like other places. So I was like, okay, I'm not really well connected with my roots. So I literally just Googled Pakistan Discord, and and the server came up. So I joined, and that was that. And that was back in May.
Huh. Yeah.
So March 2018 was my first visit to the internet, and May is when I actually started talking.
That's incredible. And now you're on a podcast. You're really going places. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, so this topic today, we're planning to discuss depression, especially depression within Pakistan as a country, but also around Pakistani communities and families. Not just Pakistanis, I guess it's a whole South Asian mindset. So we just want to understand, why is the rate of depression so high, specifically within Pakistan compared to the rest of the world? And when I say that, I'm quoting this fact that's stated by the Pakistan Medical Association, the PMA, saying that the global average of depression is 20%, whereas the Pakistani average is 34%. And that's an estimate. So that doesn't mean that 34% are clinically diagnosed with depression. These are just people who have depression and they're walking around in the country without being diagnosed, and they're just coping with it without help, right? That's an estimate shared by the PMA in 2017, which is last year as of today. So they shared some more stats, like 35.7% of citizens in Karachi alone are affected by some type of mental illness, right? For other cities, it's 43% for Quetta and 53.4% for Lahore, which is where I was born. If it's true, that's significantly higher than the global average. So I think what we really want to discuss today is, number one, why is it so high in Pakistan? And number two, the issue that it's not taken seriously by Pakistani parents, families, the community as a whole. And why is that?
So do you want to define it first or no? Or you think
depression?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, it's a good idea. So yeah, help us define depression.
Okay, sure. So depression can basically be defined as a mental illness that basically negatively impacts how you feel or the way that you think, and especially the way that you act.
Mm-hmm.
So biologically, it has to do with how your brain communicates. So the neurons in your brain, when they're communicating, they aren't basically communicating enough.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Myra, could you answer this? What's the difference between being sad and being clinically depressed?
So the thing with depression is, right, that feeling is a normal human emotion. The only time it becomes a clinical problem or an illness is if it's hindering your day-to-day life or your day-to-day function. So for example, if there's a death in your family, right, you're going to be depressed. That's your body's natural reaction to an event that happened. But let's say everything in your life is going good, right? You just got a promotion, you just bought a new house, or you're just in a state where you should be content, yet you don't feel that way. That sadness comes from depression. So in a way, if you think about it, it's not like when you should be happy or sad. It's more that it's not in your control anymore. So your body's reacting to an event that didn't happen. So for example, if you can't get out of bed in the morning, even though everything was fine, you slept on time, nothing bad happened in your day, everything was normal, except your body is reacting a certain way.
So is it possible to be depressed and not know it?
For sure. You can have physical symptoms of depression, right? So there can be a loss in appetite. You can have trouble sleeping. There can be increased fatigue. You'll notice a change in yourself, basically. But you might not link that to depression, right? Like, for example, you might be wondering, why do I sleep so much? Even though you're not tired, your body is. So it's hard to pinpoint when there's no event that caused it. So like I said, for example, if there's a death in the family or you just lost your job, right? Those things make you more disposition to be depressed, but it could still be clinical. That just means that makes you more prone to it. But at times that you don't realize you're depressed, it could be that, again, your body's reacting and you don't know what it's reacting to. So there's no cause or there's no immediate trigger. But there's almost always symptoms that if you go to a psychiatrist or any kind of physician, they should be able to diagnose.
Right. I think there's two things that come to my mind when I think about this. One is I have a relative in the family who we're pretty sure is depressed because without reason, they seem to just have a pessimistic outlook on life, just feel tired all the time, fatigue, a lot of these things that you mentioned, right? Difficult to get out of bed.
Right.
We think she's depressed, but she doesn't want to admit it. And so the mindset I hear quite often in our community, our families in general is, if you're depressed, just feel better. In Punjabi, it's just like, oh, just feel happy, you'll be fine.
Right. It's like, oh, it'll go away on. I've heard that so much.
Yeah, that's one. And then the second is I don't have depression. I have anxiety, which pops up every now and then. So every now and then I'll have an anxiety attack. I might just get anxious for no reason at all. I've had like anxiety attacks just driving, and I drive all the time, and I have no issues with it. Like, or anxiety taking a shower. Like, why would you be scared in the shower? It just happens out of the blue. Now, 95% of the time when I'm taking a shower, it doesn't happen. 5%, it just happens out of the blue. And so people find it really difficult to understand. How can it just happen, right? What are you afraid of? Just snap out of it.
Actually, you know what the interesting thing is? So anxiety attacks are different than panic attacks.
Yeah, what's the difference?
The major difference really is the way that you feel could be the same. Anxiety attacks are a reaction to a trigger. So something will trigger it. A panic attack doesn't always have to be triggered. They're very unpredictable. So for example, if you're someone who has anxiety, right? And you're put in a position where it's going to make your anxiety worse, that would be called an anxiety attack. But with a panic attack, it's more unpredictable.
That makes sense. So basically, what I just described, those are probably panic attacks and not anxiety attacks, right?
They could be. Panic attacks are more intense too.
Yeah, because they're hard to explain. They
are
happen
exactly.
out of the blue. Interesting.
They're hard to put a trigger. Because I've had a few, and it's called the association method. And what you do is, because you're trying to get your brain to calm down at that time and your mind to relax. So wherever you are, you just look at anything in the room and you talk to yourself about it. For example, so let's say I'm having a panic attack right now, and you can even do it out loud. Like, there's a black chair in front of me. There's a towel on it that white, gray, and black. And you just keep talking to yourself. And as you do that, you'll realize your brain gets confused because you're using all your senses. So you slowly calm down.
Huh.
It's really interesting, and it really works.
Wow. That's called the association what?
It's called the association method, but
Association.
Don't quote me on
I think.
that.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but it actually really worked.
All right. So I think we did a pretty good job of defining depression and mental illness in general. I guess the next thing would just be, why is it not taken so seriously in the Pakistani community? Or Hassan, maybe you have a story to share, just to help us understand why our community doesn't take it so seriously.
Okay, the reason why people don't take it seriously is probably because of a lack of education. People don't actually know what the hell depression means, so they most of the time they neglect it. And it was just like 2 days ago, a Pakistani model. She was 6 years old. She committed suicide, and it was all over the social media. Like, oh, she had all the wealth. She was beautiful, and yet, mental health and stuff. It's not a joke. If someone says they're mentally stressed out or depressed, it's not a joke. First of all, a lot of people I've come across, you tell them, okay, you're not feeling good, they'll be like, oh, just do this, do that. So no, the life hacks thing. You're like, oh, do that, do this, you're gonna be okay. But actually, it's much more complicated than this. Just I think it was 2016 or 17. I can't really remember the date, but there was a really top class student. Like he topped his school, and the reason why he committed suicide was really unknown. He was doing good in his university. He had a good family. People started to look into this case and figured out that this guy was so stressed because he could not get a job, and there was so much peer pressure from the family and everyone around him that he just couldn't take it anymore. So there's something Paki parents need to really do, is just take a step back when raising your kids. It's really important, especially if you're like in middle school or high school. It's really important that they pay attention to their kids, or just telling them, no, you're gonna do this, I don't care, and stuff like that. That's pretty bad for the child in general. If you're having a kid who's already suffering through mental illness or a lot of stress at your really young age, then you never know what's going to happen next. And most of the time, the stigma, or the typical people are going to be like, oh, probably his girlfriend ran away. Oh, he's probably going through a breakup. Oh, you lost a loved one. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, God, may Allah have mercy on his soul. And they're like, my mom's elder sister, she still can't cope with it. She's still under serious depression. I speak to her often. I'm like, okay, you need to see a doctor. You need some medicine. And every time, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I just miss them so much. So
Right.
Pakistani media have been doing a good job highlighting this issue. So if you guys want to check it out, there's a movie called Home Man Ho Jahan. I would really recommend watch it out. So it's about
Oh,
three
Home and Jahan?
friends. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
really recommend it as a young person to understand what depression could do to you. It's a good watch. We need to step up. Everyone needs to
Right.
know what the consequences of depression is. You never know. You could lose your loved ones, your best friend. It could be anyone. And I think it takes a lot of courage to talk about it, which I don't know. They see parents just ignore it. Like, mom, I'm not feeling. Oh yeah, just take a day off. Yeah, here, take some money, go eat some ice cream. That's not gonna help, right?
Yeah, I think it's the first thing you mentioned about parents, that's very important, because around that age, around like high teens, 16, 17, is I think when parents start getting confused on how to deal with their kids, right? Certain parents will get too involved in their kids' lives and they'll try to control everything and get that control back that they used to have. And then other parents, they just completely abandon their kids and just leave them to handle things on their own, thinking they're grown up enough, right? And I think in both cases, it's a lack of attention as well as negligence that just...
It's also a lack of communication. Sometimes you just gotta ask.
I think that's the word I was going for. Yeah, overall, just lack of communication. Thanks.
Right. It's also really interesting how Hassan kept mentioning suicide, because that's basically the worst case scenario if your depression isn't treated, which is why it's so important to get help.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that it's definitely a problem back home in Pakistan, but it is also just a general problem for, I guess, people of Pakistani descent, like you or me, who are not living there anymore. But I guess we all seem to know at least one person who lived and they grew up, maybe possibly right here in this country, or
and they're very
in the
educated.
developed world. Yeah, and they're very educated, and yet
Right.
still hold that mindset that it's not something to be taken seriously. And so what I've seen is like two major things I would say is how mental illness as a whole is misunderstood among our community, especially. Number one is just joking around when mental health is brought up. So I'll give an example. My grandma had dementia, right? So she would forget a lot of stuff. My dad is in that stage right now too. He's starting to forget a little bit. And it's often just a matter of joking around. Like if he forgets something, he forgot his remote somewhere, or he forgot his medicine, and we just laugh around. We just like, oh, we just told you this. We just told you that we're going this place, and he'll be like, no, you guys never told me. And then we might respond, well, we just told you 5 minutes ago, and then we laugh about it. And then I think to myself, is that really something we should joke around, or is it just something that we should actually pay close attention to and realize that my grandma or my dad possibly they need to get checked up? That's one thing. And then the second is just false attribution, considering mental illness not mental illness. So I'll give a very popular example. One popular misconception is, you might have heard this, if somebody's mentally ill, either they have schizophrenia or psychosis. Those are very common mental health. Oh, you have a jinn on you, so you have a jinn ka saya.
Possessed by a ghost?
Yeah, that's very common in Pakistan.
Okay.
So they take these the patients to Babajis or some elder of the village, and he's going to come perform exorcism on you and cure you of mental illness. And then, of course, they take a hefty bonus on the way out.
Oh, yeah. And that's absolutely the worst thing you can do. But that also has to do with the history of mental illness, right? Because there's a lot of dark, very scary.
Oh, yeah. The Western world has its fair share of that.
Right.
I mean, the witch hunts over here, that's no small example.
I mean, you've heard of the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, right? I'm pretty sure it was in Britain.
I think so, yeah. Right.
That was basically, I think it was one of the first psychiatric facilities, and they would put people with things like dyslexia in there. And they had this thing that was called public viewings, where the rich classes would pay to do things to the patient. And when I say things, I mean really dark things, like making them eat certain things that they shouldn't be eating, hitting them, watching them like animals. So it was kind of like a zoo. And this was in the 1300s, I believe. So we have a long, long history. And it sucks to say this, but we're always a bit behind when it comes to things in the South Asian community. If mental health has such a big stigma in the Western world, I can only imagine how big that stigma is within the South Asian community.
I think I got a flashback from history class back in college where we were learning about the Dark Ages in Europe. And one of the things that really stuck to me is what my professor had said. During the Dark Ages, actually, Europe was behind Asia and Africa. Like they were just less civilized. Lots of things were misunderstood. Things were unstructured, and Europe was overall just behind and very poor. Poverty, what's it called? The Black Death disease. That was very common.
The plague.
Yeah.
I mean, they were called the Dark
bubonic
Ages.
plague. Yeah, they were called the Dark Ages for a reason. Somewhere along the road, the Enlightenment happened, and I don't want to get into a history class, but something happened, and now we just tend to lag behind. Kind of like what you mentioned, we're always lagging in understanding, in knowledge, or so it seems.
You know why the Dark Ages were called the Dark Ages? Because there was no discovery then. Religion prevailed during that time, basically. And if you think about it, that's what's happening in the South Asian community. How you just mentioned, like how it's like you're possessed by a ghost. Those are all superstitious beliefs.
Every other cousin I have in Pakistan is in some way has some kind of saya spirit after him or something. There's every other cousin has some kind of thing going on, and it's always attributed to a story like that. Whereas in the US, we don't really hear those that often. So is it really happening at that high of a rate?
To be okay, as far as my fair share of experience of going back home every 2 or 3 years, yeah, there are legit cases of black magic and stuff. But people seem to over exaggerate it. And these people who claim to, oh, I'm gonna purify your soul, or you're possessed by a jinn, just turn on some Pakistani media channel, and half of the time, okay, I'm not gonna say they're people who are actually legit, but most of the time it's actually fake just to make money. And there's no understanding of your religion, of your faith, that you just believe them instead of following what you're supposed to do. And in the same case, especially when, yeah, there was a stage I was falling into depression as well. It was like somewhere around year 2 of my university. So we had a massive financial downfall. We were talking big numbers. So couldn't focus my head into university. I was not getting any sleep. I mean, it was just really bad, and I didn't reach out to my family. So I spoke to an old friend. Hey, buddy, I'm suffering from stress. I think I don't want to do anything stupid or anything. So he just told me to become a bit more spiritual, more like a religious person. And I still remember it. I'm not even kidding. It's been more than 5 years or something. I remember this in the back of my head. I don't even have to remember it or anything. So he told me this verse from the Quran, which goes like, Allah says in the Quran that remember me and I will remember you. I think, trust me, I'm not even joking. I just kept my faith in that verse, and I start praying 5 times a day, and it did. Yes, it does help. It's a very good solution, especially for Pakistanis who are actually Muslims.
But you know why that helped you, right? Because you were thinking positively.
Yeah.
So, yeah, right, exactly.
Maybe it has something mental or something, but it definitely helped me a lot. And sometimes there are some days where I'm just washed out, tired, and everything. I just think about the worst and just go to bed. And there are a lot of things to look into. Is to make sure you get proper sleep and make sure you eat well. Because in uni, I think a lot of times stress and depression is way common. As far as I see it in this part of the world, especially in the Middle East. So if you sleep well and if you eat well, and yeah, I mean those are the two major problems among youth. So that's my two advices. And yeah, if you're feeling low, talk to a friend.
Yeah, this is great. I actually do want to get into the advice. This is great advice. So maybe Myra, you can also share your bit.
So I personally think treating depression. So if they do prescribe you the antidepressant, like the SSRI, for example, like Prozac is a really common one. If they prescribe that, takes care of the biology of your depression, right? So therefore, if you're clinically depressed, that should help you. But there's also other factors into play that oftentimes would require therapy. They would require a life change. So how Hassan mentioned with school, right? Like with university, that's really like kind of, I feel like our first meeting with real stress, right? Because now the stakes are much higher. So oftentimes when you're treating depression, it comes with life changes and therapy, not just a drug. So in the States, we do prescribe drugs way too fast. So it's kind of like an easy fix, right? Like an easy solution. But if you don't take away the other things, right? If you don't change how you think, if you don't change the trigger that is causing your depression, that will take away the biology. But as soon as you stop the antidepressant, it'll come back. So I feel like it's also a lifestyle change that has to come with it.
Yeah.
I feel like in the States, we have to be much more careful on not relying on just drugs.
Yeah, because there's some people who've been taking these for 10 years, 20 years, and they're just afraid to come off of it because, first of all, the withdrawal is apparently really bad. And secondly, they just say it just comes right back.
Right. But it's also a psychiatrist, right? Their job is to strictly, it's not strictly to give you medication, but they're able to prescribe medication. And because they're doctors, they're more inclined towards fixing the problem scientifically. So they give less therapy. It's actually psychologists that do counseling or therapy and such. So you kind of have to find your fit. I don't know if you guys know, low vitamin D can also increase your chances of having depression. So some people will just take a vitamin D supplement every day because we don't get enough of that naturally, right? And they'll feel better.
And that would probably make sense because we don't get enough sun nowadays.
Exactly. And vitamin D is directly linked to your brain function. So again, this all has to do, if I wasn't studying this, I probably wouldn't know it either. So all of it, this has to do with learning more about mental health. So even in the States, we need to learn more about it. So before you go get prescribed an antidepressant, you could do a blood test and see what your vitamin D levels are, or just how you're doing in general.
Wow, yeah.
Because I know a friend who used to get really tired, and she started taking vitamin D supplements. And it's not that it made her depression totally better, but it definitely gave her energy, which got her feeling better.
That's amazing.
Exactly. So that's why mental health is also not taken seriously. It's harder to treat because it's very case to case. I wish we would treat it like a physical illness in the sense where we wouldn't put the stigma around it, but then to treat it, it's more complicated. I guess the final thing I would say personally, as human beings, it's in our nature to be really hard on ourselves than we are on other people. So oftentimes, I feel like we question our condition way more than someone else would. So I feel like it's okay to acknowledge that there's a problem and that it doesn't make you any less than what you are. And getting help, like we all get help along the way, right? Even if we're sick, right? Like even if I have a flu, I'll need help. I'll need some kind of help. So mental health is the exact same way. So getting help and acknowledging you have a problem doesn't make you any less yourself, because I feel like we're harder on ourselves than anyone else is on us. It would be easier for me to acknowledge someone else's depression than it would be to acknowledge my own.
There's a popular saying that the first step to solving a problem is just recognizing that there is one. So that's very important. Yeah,
for sure.
So Hassan, any last comment?
Yeah, just a small advice to the people who are already married or having kids is take it seriously. Just be serious if your kid comes to you or any of your family members comes and tell you they're suffering depression. Please, it's not a joke. Please help them.
Perfect. Hassan, thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure, always.
All right, thank you, Myra. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. It was nice talking to the infamous Red, finally.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.